"You belong to me now," whispered the virgin he found hidden in his abandoned ranch. The evening wind, carrying the scent of scorched prairie grass and dust, brought nothing but the whisper of old oaks to the Lone Star Ranch. For Jacob Blackwell, this whisper had been his only company for 5 years. His hands, calloused from hard labor and a desperate struggle against the arid land, gripped the wooden handle of a bucket. Loneliness became his faithful companion after the town of Black Ridge, where he was once a respected sheriff, spat him out like a poisonous seed. All because of that one incident. All because of the Graves family. The ranch, once full of life and laughter, had become a monument to his pain. The crumbling fence, the sagging barn where the wind played mournful tunes, it all mirrored his soul. He didn't need people, their judgmental stares, and whispers behind his back. He had his horse, his old dog, and a bottle of whiskey that helped dull the memories. Today, however, something was different. As he approached the barn, he heard a sound from inside, a soft sigh. It was so unexpected that Jacob froze in his tracks. He'd been alone here for 5 years. Who could have gotten onto his land? His heart, frozen in indifference, began to beat faster. Slowly, careful not to let his boots creak, he drew his Colt from its holster and cautiously pushed the door open. It shrieked as it swung wide, and a sunbeam, piercing through a crack in the wall, lit up a small figure huddled behind a pile of old sacks. It was a girl, very young, with dusty but surprisingly bright hair, the color of burnt gold, and huge eyes that held not fear, but exhaustion and resignation. She wore a tattered dress, and her face was smudged with dirt. She couldn't have been older than 18, and her appearance spoke of a long and agonizing journey. "Who are you, and what are you doing here?" Jacob's voice was hoarse as dry grass. The girl flinched and raised her gaze to him. There was no hint of coquetry in her eyes, only a bottomless, almost childlike purity. Slowly, as if each word was a struggle, she whispered, "My name is Liliana. I'm hiding." Jacob didn't immediately understand who she was hiding from, or what. He lowered his revolver, his grim face softening. He knew that feeling, the feeling of a hunted animal. He himself had to hide, but not in a physical sense. He was hiding from his own demons, from his past. From who? His voice became softer, but a note of suspicion still lingered. From those who are looking for me." Her voice trembled, and she hugged herself, as if she was cold. Jacob looked her over from head to toe. She didn't look like a fugitive criminal or a drifter. There was a fragile, barely perceptible aristocratic quality about her that completely clashed with her current state. Her hands, thin and pale, seemed untouched by hard work, and her manners, despite her desperate situation, were graceful. He felt a sense of intrigue rise within him. What secret lay behind this young girl? And why had she chosen his abandoned ranch? He, a hermit rejected by society, had suddenly become involved in someone else's drama. "There's no one here. You have nothing to be afraid of," he said, putting his revolver back in the holster. He held out his hand to her. "Get up. Are you hungry?" Liliana timidly took his hand. Her palm was cold as marble. She stood, and Jacob noticed she was limping. On her ankle, there was a deep, inflamed cut. He frowned. This girl wasn't just running away, she was in real trouble. "Where I came from. They're looking for me. They want to take me back, and I can't go back." Her words sounded like fragments of a nightmare. Jacob led her to the house. He didn't ask unnecessary questions or demand explanations. He simply offered her food, water, and a clean place to rest. At the doorstep, when Liliana hesitated to enter, he looked at her. In the dim light of the setting sun, her eyes seemed even more mysterious. They held not only a plea, but also a hidden, incomprehensible strength. It was at this moment that he felt something in his soul change. "You don't have to tell me who you are," he said, his voice low and serious. "But you'll be safe here. No one will find you." He led her to one of the rooms where his mother used to live. The room was clean, but covered in a layer of forgotten dust. Jacob lit a kerosene lamp, and the soft light filled the space, making it cozy. Liliana sank onto the old sofa, her shoulders trembling. She was at her breaking point. He brought her a bowl of hot stew and a mug of water. She ate slowly, as if she had forgotten how. When she finished, Jacob sat across from her, watching. He noticed how her face transformed once she felt safe. Color returned to her cheeks, and her eyes were no longer so frightened. "Thank you," she whispered. I don't know how to repay you. I don't need anything," he replied, his gaze direct and honest. "But I want to know one thing. Why did you come here?" Liliana lowered her eyes, her hands clenched into fists. She took a deep breath. "I heard this ranch was abandoned, that its owner was a hermit who kept to himself. I thought I would be safe here, but I didn't know you were here." She wasn't lying. Jacob could feel it. Her words were sincere, and there was no deceit in her eyes. She truly was a lost soul seeking refuge. At this moment, Jacob made a decision that would change their lives forever. "You belong to me now," he whispered, his voice barely audible. The words were not a threat or a statement of ownership. They were a promise of protection, of refuge. In his raspy whisper was something more than just words. There was the guilt he carried for past mistakes, compassion for her plight, and a determination to protect this fragile, mysterious girl. He didn't know why he was doing it. Maybe because she was a reflection of his own loneliness. Maybe because he saw in her something he had lost himself: innocence, purity. Liliana, looking up at him, froze. There was no terror in her gaze, but rather shock. She hadn't expected to hear those words, but their meaning was clear to her. She nodded, as if accepting her fate. And in that silent agreement, in that quiet nod, a secret was hidden. A secret that connected them both, though they didn't know it yet. A secret that would lead to conflict, revelations, and perhaps salvation. Their destinies intertwined that evening, at the edge of the world, on an abandoned ranch where two lonely souls found each other. One running from the past, the other running from the present, and neither suspecting that they had far more in common than they thought. Part 2 morning on the Lone Star Ranch began with an unaccustomed silence. Jacob Blackwell woke before dawn, as always, but today his thoughts were far from mundane concerns. He didn't light the fireplace or brew coffee. Instead, he stood at the window, watching the barn. He felt her presence. Liliana was an uninvited guest who had broken his 5 years of solitude, and it filled him with a mix of anxiety and something else he couldn't define. His old sheriff instincts to protect and defend fought with his hermit instinct to avoid and hide. He remembered her eyes, clear as a mountain stream and full of a deep sadness. She called herself Liliana, but Jacob felt her whole story was hidden behind that name, and he, against his will, had become a part of it. His words, "You belong to me now," were spoken in a rush, but they were sincere. He wasn't going to keep her, he was going to protect her. But from whom and why? He walked to the mirror. His face, weathered by the wind and scorched by the sun, was covered in deep wrinkles. A grey streak at his temple was the only reminder that he was once a different man. He was a sheriff, and he had always believed in the law. But the law had failed him when he tried to protect an innocent man. And now he himself was a fugitive from his own past. Jacob went resolutely to the barn. Liliana sat on the old sacks, her knees pulled to her chest. Her hair, the color of golden grain, cascaded over her shoulders, and she seemed so fragile that he wanted to shield her from the whole world. But he knew he couldn't. "Are you hungry?" he asked, offering her a piece of bread and a canteen of water. She nodded, took the food, and began to eat eagerly. Jacob sat opposite her, watching. He noticed her hands were trembling, and it wasn't from the cold, it was fear. "I won't hurt you, Liliana," he said, his voice soft. "But I need to know who you're running from, so I can protect you." She looked up at him. The same shock from yesterday reappeared in her eyes. I can't tell you. It's dangerous. For you, too." Jacob frowned. "I'm not afraid of danger, but I won't hide someone if I don't know what I'm protecting them from." Liliana lowered her head, and her shoulders began to shake. She was on the verge of tears. Jacob felt a growing sense of compassion. He knew what it was like to carry a burden you couldn't share with anyone. He remembered the face of his late wife, Annie, who always knew when he was lying and could always read his mind. He was lonely, but this girl was even more so. "Please," she whispered, "just let me stay here for a few days. I won't be a bother. I can work. I know how to milk cows, take care of chickens." Jacob smiled. Smiles rarely appeared on his face, and this one was rather bitter. "I have no cows or chickens, just a horse and an old dog." She blushed. I didn't know. I thought this was a ranch. It is abandoned," he finished for her. "For everyone, but not for me." He felt a new intrigue rising within him. Why was she so determined to hide her identity? Why was she so afraid? His mind, which had been occupied with routine chores for years, suddenly came alive, weaving threads of speculation. "Are you from Black Ridge?" he asked, his voice quieter. Liliana flinched. She looked at him, her eyes full of fear. "Why do you think that?" "Because it's the closest town, and if you're running, you came from there." And he paused. "I know everyone in Black Ridge, but I don't know you. I am from another town." She turned away, avoiding his gaze. "I can't." Jacob didn't press her. He knew the truth would come out. He brought her water and bandages. He clumsily tended to the cut on her ankle himself. When he finished, she looked at him with such gratitude that his heart ached. "Why are you doing this?" she asked. "I don't know," he answered honestly. I can't leave you on the road." That was a half-truth. He wasn't doing this just because. In her fragility, in her vulnerability, he saw something that compelled him to act. He saw a desperate hope in her, and he, a man who had long lost all hope, could not destroy it. The next day, he left for town. Liliana was frightened, but Jacob promised he would return. She waited for him, sitting on the porch of the house, watching his figure grow smaller on the horizon. Her heart pounded like a drum. She was afraid he wouldn't come back, and she was afraid he would. She couldn't let him become part of her story. Her secret was too dangerous. While he was gone, she explored the ranch. It was abandoned, but not forgotten. Inside the house, everything was clean, but covered in a layer of dust. Old photographs hung on the walls. In one of them was a beautiful, young woman with kind eyes. Next to her stood a young, strong man with an open face and a confident smile. It was Jacob, but a different Jacob, not the one she had met, not the man he was now. In another photo, Jacob held a small boy in his arms. His eyes were full of love. Liliana felt tears well up in her eyes. She realized that this man was not just a hermit, but a man who had lost everything. When Jacob returned, he found her by the fireplace. She was cleaning something, and her movements were fluid and graceful. "You shouldn't have done that," she said, not looking at him. "You shouldn't have come back." Jacob placed a bag of supplies on the table. "Why? Weren't you waiting for me? I didn't want you to get involved with me. It's dangerous. I'm not just hiding. I'm in trouble. And if you help me, they will find you. And they won't be merciful." Jacob looked at her. In his eyes, there was no fear, no anger, just sadness. He walked toward her. "I know who you are, Liliana," he said quietly. She looked up at him, her face frozen in shock. It was pure panic. How did you find out?" "In town. I saw your portrait on a wanted poster," he said, handing her a piece of paper. "Liliana Graves, wanted, daughter of," he trailed off, not wanting to say the name. Liliana read the poster. Her face was whiter than a sheet. In the portrait, she looked completely different. Happy, smiling, in an expensive dress. She looked like a princess, but her eyes held the same sadness. "Why did you do this?" she asked, and her voice was filled with guilt. She knew she had put him in danger. "Because I had to know who you were running from. But I know you're not a criminal. I saw your face. I know you're being hunted for something else. And I know who your father is." She lowered her eyes. "My father is. He's the man who ruined my life. And he'll ruin yours, too, if you don't stop helping me." Jacob didn't reply. He just stood there, watching her. He knew it was hard for her to talk about this. He knew she needed time. He held out his hand to her. She took it. And in that moment, they both felt their destinies intertwine. And it wasn't just a coincidence. It was part of something bigger. Part 3. That night, the Lone Star Ranch ceased to be just a refuge. It became a place where two broken souls intertwined. Jacob sat opposite Liliana, watching her hold a crumpled piece of paper, her own wanted poster. His heart, which he had thought long dead, began to beat again. But not from fear. It was from shock. He didn't believe it. Not for a second. Her eyes, her fragility, her fright, everything told him she was a victim, not a criminal. But the accusation was serious. The name Graves, printed at the bottom, seared his memory like a brand. Mr. William Graves, a powerful and ruthless landowner whose influence stretched far beyond Black Ridge. He was the very man who had ruined Jacob's life 5 years ago. That's not true, he whispered quietly, taking the poster from her hands. I don't believe this. Liliana looked up at him, her eyes full of tears. There was guilt in them, not for a crime, but for dragging him into her story. It is true. I hurt him, but I didn't mean to kill him. He wanted to force me. He wanted to marry me off to a man I didn't love, a man I despised. I tried to escape, but he caught me, and then I grabbed a knife. It was self-defense. Jacob listened, and his anger grew. He saw his own history in her words. Graves was known for his cruelty and dominance. He was the one who had destroyed the family Jacob tried to protect, the very family he couldn't save. And now that same shadow of Graves had fallen on Liliana. Why didn't you go to the sheriff? He asked. Liliana gave a bitter laugh. Who would believe me when my father is the most powerful man in the county? He'd say I was crazy, that I just ran away to avoid a marriage. And then he'd force me to come back and finish what he started. Jacob clenched his fists. He knew she was right. In Black Ridge, the law was on the side of those with the most money and power. Jacob himself had been a victim of that law when they tried to make him believe that his friend, an innocent farmer, was a thief. He refused, and as a result, he lost his badge and his respect, and later, his home. You can't hide here forever, he said. He'll find you. He won't stop until he gets what he wants. I know, Liliana said, but what can I do? I have no one, no friends, no family. I'm alone. Jacob took a deep breath. He held out his hand and helped her stand. You have me, and I won't give you up. These words weren't just a promise. They were an oath. The oath of a man who vowed he would never hide again. He realized that his meeting with Liliana wasn't a coincidence but fate. He hadn't just found her, he had found his chance to atone for the past. Hiding isn't a solution, he said. We have to fight. Fight. Her eyes widened with fear. Him. It's impossible. He's all-powerful. No, Jacob said firmly. He's not all-powerful. He's just a man. And he has a weakness. Everyone does. He led her to the fireplace. On the wall hung a photograph of his late wife, Annie, and their son, Tommy. Liliana looked at them with compassion. Were they your family? She asked. Jacob nodded, his voice trembling. Yes, my son died. He was sick, and we couldn't save him. I couldn't. Liliana squeezed his hand. She felt his pain. She knew what it was like to lose loved ones. She had lost her mother at a young age, and her father was too busy with his affairs to care for her. I understand, she whispered. I'm so sorry. You shouldn't be, Jacob said. But I should have done something to save him. I should have. He paused. I did something wrong, and he used it against me. Who? Liliana asked, her eyes full of intrigue. Who used your past against you? Jacob looked up at her. The same man you're running from. William Graves. He knew my son was sick. He offered me help, money. But in return, he wanted me to do something for him. He wanted me to help him with some business. I refused. He said I would regret it. He ruined my life. He made me lose everything. Liliana gasped. The shock of realizing her fate was intertwined with Jacob's was overwhelming. She hadn't just found a refuge, she had found a man who had his own scores to settle with her father. Why didn't you tell anyone about this? She asked. Because I couldn't prove anything, he replied. He was too smart, and he had connections. No one would have believed me. In that moment, looking at Liliana, Jacob realized their meeting wasn't just fate, it was atonement. His guilt over his son's death now turned into compassion for her. He was ready to do everything to protect her, to atone for his past mistake. He couldn't bring his son back, but he could save her. "We have to find a way," Liliana said, and a spark lit up in her eyes. "We have to find a way to prove Hayes a liar. We have to find evidence that I'm not a murderer. I don't want to hide anymore." Jacob nodded. "Me neither." They both knew their path wouldn't be easy, but for the first time in many years, they felt they weren't alone. They were two souls, broken by the same man, and now they were ready to fight together. Part 4. Jacob and Liliana spent the rest of the night discussing a plan. The air in the old house was charged with a mix of despair and a new, budding hope. They had no money or power, but they had something more important: personal motivation and knowledge. Jacob knew everything about Graves. He knew that his wealth was built on deception, and his power rested on fear. "We have to go back to Black Ridge," Jacob said, pouring cold coffee into mugs. "We can't find evidence if we just stay here." Liliana shook her head, her face pale. "It's too dangerous. He'll be waiting for me. I saw how he looked at me. He thinks I'm his property." In her words, Jacob heard not only fear, but despair. It was hard for her to believe they could win. He placed a hand on her shoulder. "I know," he said. "That's why we won't go into town like you. Well, go in like me. I know where he hides his dirty secrets." Jacob told her about an old warehouse on the outskirts of town where Graves stored his goods. He was sure that somewhere in those old boxes and dusty papers lay the proof of his deception. He was confident that the key to their freedom was there. "We have to find the land purchase documents." He used fake papers to fraudulently acquire land from farmers. "I know this because my friend, whom he accused of theft, tried to expose him, and he paid the price for it." Liliana listened, and a spark ignited in her eyes. It wasn't the spark of fear, but of focus. She was no longer a victim. She was an ally, and she was ready to fight. The next morning, before the sun had risen, Jacob and Liliana set out. He dressed her in old, warm clothes so she wouldn't attract attention. They moved along overgrown trails, avoiding the main roads. They were like two shadows, gliding through the morning mist. When they reached the town, Jacob felt his heart beat faster. He remembered how he had once been the sheriff here, a respected man, but now he was just a fugitive, hiding from his past. He felt a strong fear. He wasn't afraid for himself, but for Liliana. He knew if they were caught, Graves would show no mercy. They cautiously crept to the old warehouse. It was dark and dusty inside. Liliana pulled out a lantern, and its beam lit up mountains of boxes and sacks. Their hearts beat in unison, and every sound seemed louder than thunder. They began to search. In one of the crates, covered with old sacks, they found a small chest. It was locked, but Jacob, using his old skills, managed to open it. Inside were the documents they were looking for. Bills of sale, signed with names he knew well, and the signatures on them were forged. In that moment, holding the evidence in their hands, they felt triumph. It wasn't just proof of Liliana's innocence, it was proof of Graves' wrongdoing. It was their chance at justice. "We did it," Liliana whispered, her eyes shining. "We did it." Suddenly, they heard voices. Someone was approaching. They quickly hid the documents and crouched behind the crates. "I heard a noise," one of the voices said. It was Graves' assistant. "Someone's in here." Jacob grabbed Liliana's hand and pulled her into a dark corner of the warehouse. Their hearts pounded. They were trapped. Their triumph turned into horror. Suddenly, Liliana did something unexpected. She grabbed an old iron rod and threw it to the other side of the warehouse. A loud clang echoed throughout the building. Graves' assistant and his men headed in that direction. "Run," Liliana whispered to Jacob. "I'll distract them. You have to take the documents to the sheriff." Jacob looked at her. There was no more fear in her eyes, only determination, and this was the greatest horror he had ever felt, because he knew she was ready to sacrifice herself for him. "No," he said. "We'll go together." But Liliana was already running in the other direction, drawing their attention. "Run," "Jacob, this is our only chance." Jacob hesitated. He didn't want to leave her, but he knew she was right. If they were caught together, they would lose everything. He looked at the documents, squeezed them in his hand, and ran in the opposite direction. He heard the shouts of Graves' men chasing Liliana. He knew that now he had only one chance. He had to get to the sheriff and reveal the truth, and he had to do it before Graves got to Liliana. And in his heart, amidst the fear and despair, a fury burned. Fury at Graves, at his lies and cruelty. And that fury gave him strength. Part 5. Jacob ran as fast as he could. In his hand were the crumpled documents, his only hope. He heard the cries of the chase and Liliana's clear, though distant, voice, distracting Graves' men. Her act, her desperate sacrifice for him, filled him with a mixture of fear and admiration. She, a fragile girl, was not afraid to challenge a whole group of men. He ran through the dark streets of Black Ridge, avoiding the light of the lanterns, just as he once avoided his own past. His old sheriff skills came back to him. He knew where to turn, how to bypass the patrol, and where to find the sheriff. He felt anger rising within him, but not at Liliana, and not at Graves, at himself, for not being able to protect her, for letting her take such a risk. Finally, he reached the sheriff's office. The door was locked. He began to bang on it, but no one answered. He knew the old sheriff had long since retired, and the new one, young and inexperienced, was completely under Graves' control. In that moment, Jacob felt despair. All his efforts, all of Liliana's courage, were in vain. The law he had once so revered was on the side of evil. He clenched his fists, and a thought flashed through his mind. If the law won't help, then I'll do it myself. Suddenly, a realization dawned on him. He didn't need to go to the sheriff. He needed to go to the people. He ran to a house he knew well, the home of an old farmer whom Graves had tried to cheat. Jacob knocked on the door, and the farmer's wife, Mrs. Macy, opened it. She looked at him in surprise, her eyes filled with tears. "Mr. Blackwell, what are you doing here? We thought you were." She trailed off. "I need your help," he said, handing her the documents. "Graves cheated you. I found the proof." Mrs. Macy took the documents, and shock appeared in her eyes. She saw her name, her husband's name. She realized they had been victims of a scam. "But why?" she whispered. "Why are you doing this? He didn't just cheat you. He ruined my friend's life. And now he's trying to ruin he stopped my companion's life. He put out a wanted poster for a crime she didn't commit." At that moment, Mr. Macy came out of the house. He looked at the documents, and his face furrowed. He felt anger, strong and righteous. He knew Graves was a dishonest man, but he couldn't prove anything. Now he had the proof. "We have to show this to everyone," he said. "We'll gather the people." Jacob nodded. He knew this was their only chance. If they could gather enough people, Graves couldn't stand against them. When they gathered in the town square, they already had a large group of people. Farmers, workers, even some merchants who had also suffered from Graves' actions. Jacob stepped forward, held the documents high, and began to speak. He spoke about Graves, about his lies and deception. He spoke about Liliana, about her innocence. He spoke about justice. The people listened, and their faces changed. Fury and outrage mixed with hope. At that moment, the sheriff and his deputies appeared in the square. They were on Graves' side, and they ordered the people to disperse. But no one moved. There were already too many people in the square. Suddenly, shouts were heard. Graves was coming toward them. He was furious. He was accompanied by his bodyguards, and he was walking straight toward Jacob. "What are you doing, Blackwell?" he shouted. "Are you trying to stir up trouble? You know you and your companion are criminals." "She's not a criminal," Jacob replied calmly. "But you are a liar, and I have the proof." Jacob threw the documents on the ground, and Mr. Macy began handing them out to the people. Graves' face went pale. He was caught. He tried to back away, but the people surrounded him. At that moment, among the crowd, Jacob saw Liliana. She was standing there, whole and unharmed. He felt relief. She was safe. She had not sacrificed herself in vain. Graves was arrested. His power crumbled. The people who had once feared him now looked at him with contempt. The sheriff, seeing the entire crowd was against him, did not resist. He knew his career in Black Ridge was over. That evening, as the sun was setting, Jacob and Liliana stood on a hill, looking at the town. "You saved me," she said, her eyes full of gratitude. "You saved us," he replied. He realized he hadn't just saved her, he had saved himself. He had shed his past. He understood that his guilt over his son's death was not his fault. He had done everything he could. And now, when he looked at Liliana, he saw more than just her. He saw the future. A future where there was no place for the past. A future where they were together. It was their reconciliation. A reconciliation with themselves, with the past, with the world. Part 6. Several months passed. The sun once again shone brightly over the Lone Star Ranch, but now it illuminated not loneliness, but a new life. Jacob and Liliana were rebuilding the house. Every board, every nail, every repaired section of the roof was a symbol of their own story. They were building not just a house, but a future. William Graves, having lost his power and influence, was sentenced to a long term for fraud and attempted murder. His empire had collapsed, and the residents of Black Ridge could finally breathe freely. Liliana was officially acquitted. The wanted poster for her was taken down, and her name was cleared of shame. One day, Liliana sat on the porch, watching Jacob repair the fence. She felt a sense of peace. Fear, despair, and pain were in the past. Now her heart was filled with something new. Not only gratitude, but also a deep love for the man who had saved her. Jacob had also changed. He was no longer a grim hermit. His face, still weathered, was now more often lit up with a smile. He had found meaning in life again. He was able to atone for his past guilt by protecting Liliana, and it brought him reconciliation with himself and with the world. Liliana walked up to him and placed her hand on his shoulder. He stopped and looked at her. "Thank you," she whispered, "for everything." He took her hand and kissed it. "You don't have to thank me. You are my savior. You gave me my life back." She smiled. We saved each other. They realized that their meeting had not been a coincidence. It was a link in a chain of events that led them to this moment. A moment when they could finally feel happy. That evening, as the sun set behind the hills, they stood together, watching the sunset. "You know," Jacob said, "all this time I thought the Lone Star Ranch was a place where I would hide. But now I realize it's a place where I was meant to start over." Liliana looked at him, and her eyes were full of hope. "Start over with us. Together." He nodded. "Together." And in that moment, looking up at the starry sky, they knew their story was just beginning. The story of two lonely souls who found each other and found a new home, a new family, and a new life.